When we speak on trade, tariffs, and global growth, let's quickly on stage invite, as we are honored to welcome His Excellency Lazăr Comănescu, who is the Secretary General of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization and former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania. With decades of diplomatic experience, he's joining us on stage, and in conversation with him is Shishir Priyadarshi, who is the President of the Chintan Research Foundation and former Director at the World Trade Organization, a seasoned expert on global trade frameworks and policy negotiations. Thank you very much for taking out your time. Over to you.
Very warm welcome, Lazăr. And I love these 15-minute sessions. You can bang on. My only starting point is you should certainly have had the word trade tariffs and global uncertainty. And I think that's what we'd love to focus on, how uncertain is the global trade landscape, and that's what we need to address. So Lazăr, let me start straight away, just 2 words. Are we moving towards greater fragmentation in global trade, or are we moving towards greater connectivity like the kinds that you see through FTAs?
Allow me, first of all, to share with you how pleased and honored I am to be here in this and to have been invited in such an important event like the GBS. And I say that all the more so as I see it in this invitation, not just a pleasure, but an honor to the organization, which I have the honor to represent, because that means that here in India, which is actually, it's one of the real engines of growth, globally speaking. I see that there is an interest in the region which I am coming from. And I have to say that there is reasons to be interested in this. When you look into the region which is covered by the Organization of the Economic Cooperation in the Black Sea, you may see that there is a quite important market consisting of more than 350 million people. Not to speak about the fact that this region is, for example, securing more than 20% of the global trade in grains, for example. Not to speak about energy and others. So this is, once again, a reason for which I feel all the more honored to be here today. This is one point. But there is another one. And I'm trying to come to your question. It happens that this conference takes place almost in the same time with another important international event, which is the Munich Security Conference. But there is talk about mainly hard security. But there is another important point which is linked to this forum over here of New Delhi. One should not forget or not neglect that there is an extremely important economic dimension of security. And this is something which I see as it has been discussed here in these 2 days here in New Delhi. Because how can we conceive security on long term without economic development, without economic cooperation? And here I'm coming to globalization versus fragmentation, which was referred to by our distinguished moderator. I personally, I know there is a lot of talk about the deglobalization, the regionalization, fragmentation, and so on. I would say, as a very good friend of mine in Romania is saying, that what we are witnessing now is not a deglobalization. It's a process of re-globalization. And through various local, bilateral, regional arrangements, one actually is seeking how to face the new emerging international order, an order which will be based on revised rules, because everybody speaks about the respect of rules and so on. Yes, but those rules established 80 years ago, we have to admit that they have to be changed. Yeah, but they have to be changed through dialogue, not through competition and to imposing from one side on the others.
Agree with you. Economic security probably will lead to other kinds of security. And one security that is right staring at us is that clock,
Yeah.
so we'll keep to the time security too.
Absolutely.
Let me get to the nitty-gritty of it. You know, if we went around this room and said in the context of tariff, what is the word in the last few months that you've heard most? And I think it'll be fairly, I mean, for me, easy to say, you'd either come up with weaponization of trade, or you'll come up with tariff wars. In any case, what is being struck at the heart of the very, very foundation is the stability and predictability that the bound rates and the MFN rates on tariff that the World Trade Organization had provided. They've just gone out of the window. And I want to ask you, Lazăr, that in a world where increasingly you will not have recourse to the dispute settlement system that the WTO provided, you will not have recourse to the MFN rate of duty that they had. So is nearshoring more important or friendshoring more important?
Sorry, what?
I mean, do you want to look for supply chains which is near and accessible, or do you want to look for supply chains that are with friends?
You want to have supply. First of all, it is extremely important. It's part of the security I was referring to. To have predictability and to be able to project economic development, you have to provide for or to avail of sure supply chains. Without that, it's impossible. And from this perspective, I would say that the region I'm coming from, and which is, well, my organization is dealing with, is of key importance in providing that opportunity or the possibility of having secure supply zones. Why I'm telling that? Because you all know about the fact that in the recent past, there have been a lot of initiatives, important initiatives dedicated to connectivity. Be it BRI, IMEC, Middle Corridor, Global Gateway of the European Union, and so on. But when you look into the map, and we are talking about how to provide for the best links between Europe and Asia. And for Europe, it is essential because Asia is the center of economic growth today and for the future as well. You cannot avoid but crossing the Black Sea region. Be it about sea transportation, road transportation, multimodal transportation. And this is why we in the organization, we've been trying to promote and to develop projects which may be able to facilitate this, let's say, increase in the security of the supply. There are two projects I would like to mention. One is the so-called motorways of the sea, which is conceived as building up a kind of a network, providing as good as possible links between Europe via the Black Sea, further on Caspian Sea, or downwards via the Mediterranean, Suez Canal, and the Indian Ocean, and coming to India as well.
Lazăr, thank you. You've raised 2 points which allow me to then perhaps put 2 questions. You talked about regionalism and you also talked about trade corridors. Let's start with the first one. Clearly, over the last maybe 15 or 20 years, regional trade blocs, regional customs union, they were very important, just like the one you also represent at the Black Sea. Today, there is probably a greater shift that geographical proximity is not required, and you could have a trade cooperation with countries which could be, you know, the closest distance could well be through the center of the earth. So you tell me, how important is geographical proximity to this whole concept of regional cooperation? And second, in a way related, can you have regional cooperation now between blocs? I mean, rather than just between countries, you know, you create blocs and then they create the regional cooperation. Lazăr.
Well, I will start with trying to make a comment on the last part of your question, and because what I see is first of all, regional cooperation, be it formalized in organizations like the one which I represent and others, because there are a lot. This proved to be a good instrument for developing cooperation. Because, you know, regional and among neighbors cooperation is good as far as it is based upon really a fair approach. Because here is another aspect which I want to stress. We all recognize that competition has been an engine of growth. But when that competition is a fair one and not used or if looked at as an instrument of domination or control by some, and from this perspective, developing regional cooperation, especially when it comes to countries which are not big countries and so on. This is a way how to be able to compete in a competition with the bigger actors. And from this perspective, you see, the European Union is now searching kind of, let's say, under the current circumstances, it's aiming at, of course, first of all, deepening the integration inside the European Union, but also establishing predictable and stable and secure links with other parts of the world. And the recently signed free trade agreement between the European Union and India is just one example. There are many others as well. But regional cooperation, I see it as a way through, how to say, to make the best possible use of the resources locally, but at the same time of finding the best possible way of interlinking with other regional organizations or other important markets or countries.
Sure, sure. No, thank you. Thank you for then talking about the India-EU FTA. In fact, in any economic discussion in the last few weeks in India, initially the India-EU FTA, and I think more recently the India-US trade agreement, of which perhaps slightly lesser details are known. But on this point, and perhaps I have a small view myself, do you think with the kind of increasing number of free trade agreements that countries are having, do you think this will weaken the global multilateral trading system, or do you think it'll actually strengthen it? And I'm not sure.
I am tempted to say that, in a way, I was alluding to this in my previous comments. I see all these initiatives, efforts, free trade agreements, or regional, let's say, platform of cooperation, as modality to adapt at the same time to, how to say, to create opportunities so as to face what would be a new international order. This is, in my opinion, where we are. And because sooner or later, as I said already, despite many comments which may be contrary to what I'm saying, globalization is there and interdependencies will become even stronger, especially in a period of digitalization. We've been listening to this today and yesterday. By the way, the Prime Minister was yesterday stressing how important it is, the revolution which is coming up with the digitalization. Digitalization means what? Practically increase of interdependencies. But here, there is one point which is extremely important to be taken into account. It is not just interdependencies among countries, among the role of non-state actors is also increasing. This is what I see as the core of the new international order, finding an appropriate networking or a framework where you have governmental actors, state actors, but also non-state actors. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to business, whatever governments may decide, plans, initiative, projects, and so on, if you don't have, you have to have somebody to implement it. This is the business, the entrepreneurial community. And that's why, in my opinion, bringing in entrepreneurial community, not just in the implementation of projects, but also in the shaping of decisions and plans is quintessential.
No, actually, I couldn't agree more. I don't know what all of you in the audience think. That globalization actually leads to interdependence, which over the last 2 decades had actually been thought to be a good thing. But there are, certain actors, certain major actors who are actually, I would say, weaponizing interdependence. Yeah. If I'm dependent on you, then they want to extract a price. And that perhaps again hits very much. But that is a subject we can carry on discussing. But I'll take up the last point about specifically that governments may create agreements, government may sign agreements, but it's finally the industry, the business, which has to trade. So how important do you think is the role of people like here, who are all business leaders, who are industry leaders, who represents India's growth story? How important is their contribution towards the success of any free trade agreement that a country signs?
No, to say important is, I would say, too little. It's extremely important. And by the way, you may wish to know that it is not by mere chance that within the structure of the organization which I'm representing here in front of you today, we have established also a business council. A business council which consists of what? Of representatives of the business companies in each of the member states of the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization. And since I've been Secretary General of this organization, I've tried to make this business council to assert itself as the real promoter of and the one who is creating opportunities for cooperation among the governments. So the role of the business is quintessential.
Brilliantly said. I mean, he said, let I use the word important as too little. We've got to find another adjective for all you gentlemen and ladies in the room. But listen, I mean, we are all, I know, and I'll branch off only for a minute into Hindi. You know, my name is Priyadarshi, but today all of you need to be Doordarshis to determine what next to do. So the real question, I think, is important. We need to be prepared for the future. And as we were talking outside, if every crisis is to be seen as an opportunity, then perhaps what global trade has seen in the last few months is the opportunity to plan ahead. Any thoughts on that, Lazăr?
And all these agreements which we were discussing, they are the proof that there is an awareness in this respect. And these agreements, long-term agreements like the one which has been signed, were signed also by India. Yesterday, the Prime Minister was referring to the fact that only in this year there was 5 agreements which India has signed with other actors. This is something which projects how one should evolve in the future. And this is the best possible instrument under the current circumstances. Until, as I said, through all these instruments, a new, let's say, set of rules governing the international economic cooperation will become operational.
Thank you. And as we come probably towards possibly the last, or maybe we might have one more question, let me preface the question by something that our Commerce and Trade Minister said very recently. Minister Piyush Goyal, I think, said 2 things in the context of globalization. He said India, when it negotiates, must not negotiate as a $3 or a $4 trillion economy, but must negotiate looking far ahead when we hope to be a 10 or a 15 or a 20 trillion. You know, that's the vision you should have. That's the mindset you should have. And related to this, the other very important point he made was that no country can fully develop without integrating itself into global economy. And if you look at the way the Southeast Asian countries about 20 odd years back rose, so I want to ask you how, and maybe that could be your comment here, how important do you think is to look ahead in the kind of growth that we want, and how important it is to integrate through globalization?
Well, look, that's what we've been trying to do, including in my organization. You may be surprised to hear the fact that despite everybody knows that for 4 years already, this region of the Black Sea has been confronted with a war. But nevertheless, and this is the important element which I want to bring to your attention, we've been able, exactly because there is, despite of the fact that we have war, there is an awareness about the need to look on the long term. And this enabled us, despite all these difficulties, to come up with a new Black Sea economic strategy agenda, which is projecting, defining the lines of action of cooperation in this part of the world for the next decade. So it's this way that I see how to prepare for the future.
Lazăr, thank you so much. I think that's been a phenomenal conversation we've had. It's probably allowed us to touch on about a dozen issues, each one of which we could have spent many a moment. A few words just to conclude this session. What others do, we have less control. So therefore, let's try and take our own future destiny in the context of global trade in our hands. And finally, I must say, the stronger the multilateral organizations are, the more stability and predictability we'll provide. And therefore, rather than seeing what is happening as a turmoil, perhaps we should see this as the most important occasion for a reform in multilateral institutions.
And building upon what has been done so far, but also take into account lessons learned. Why, for example, the organization you've been working with at a very highly qualitative way, in my opinion, the World Trade Organization has to be revived and so as to allow this organization to become what it has to be, the one which helps having really a global ruled order in terms of economic trade and cooperation.
Perfect. With that word and hoping that India leads the reform and India leads the new change into WTO, ladies and gentlemen, let me join you in thanking Ambassador Lazăr.
Thank you.